Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Good morning, everybody. Okay, we continue now with our study in the last chapter of our book. This is the chapter called The Planes of Realization. And this chapter deals with the different stages of attainment along the path to Nibbana. In last week's class, I explained how the stages of realization are divided into four. The final stage is the stage of full liberation, the stage where the mind is completely released from all of the bonds and fetters. And this is the stage called Arhatship. But the attainment of Arhatship generally doesn't take place instantaneously, but along the path there are certain preliminary stages of realization in which one gradually eliminates ignorance and the defilements. The first stage, which marks what we call, or what the text called, the breakthrough to the Dhamma, Dhamma Visamaya. This is called stream entry or Sotapatti. At this stage, the disciple who has been developing insight systematically, methodically, intensively, reaches a point where the mind breaks through all conditioned phenomena and momentarily gets a glimpse of that state which is unconditioned. This is Nibbana. And at the time that one makes this breakthrough to the experience of Nibbana, one simultaneously realizes all four noble truths. So this is called the gaining of the eye of Dhamma. The Dhammachakku. This is the eye that sees directly into the truth of the Dhamma, comprehending all four noble truths simultaneously. With the attainment of the stage of stream entry, one becomes fixed in destination, niyatta, which means that one is bound to reach final liberation. One cannot fall back anymore. And it's said that one is bound to reach final liberation in a maximum of 7 more lifetimes. So even if one doesn't make a very determined effort, just the stream of the Dhamma into which one has entered will carry one along so that one will naturally develop the required spiritual faculties, and then one will in time break through the remaining stages till one arrives at the final stage, the stage of full liberation or Arhatship. So the person who becomes the stream enterer is fixed in destination and sambodha parayano. This one has full enlightenment as his or her destination. That is, they can never fall away from the eventual attainment of full enlightenment. They already have, I call this the quarter moon of enlightenment. And they're bound, just like the quarter moon during the waxing phase is bound to eventually turn into a full moon, so the person at this stage is bound to reach the full moon of full enlightenment. At this stage, with the arising of the I of Dhamma, the disciple permanently eradicates the first 3 of the 10 fetters. What are these first 3 fetters? The first is called Sakkaya Ditthi, which we can explain as the view of a truly existing self in relation to the 5 aggregates, taking the 5 aggregates to be either the self, to be identical with the self, or having the view that within the 5 aggregates there is some kind of truly existing self. The self which might possess the aggregates, be comprised within them, or a kind of universal self that embraces the 5 aggregates. So one cuts off this Sakkaya Ditthi, the view of a truly existing self. One cuts off doubt about the Buddha, about the Dharma, about the Sangha. Because now one has seen the truth of the Dhamma, and so one knows this is the same truth that the Buddha himself has realized and taught, and so one knows that the Buddha is Sambuddha, the enlightened one. One has seen the Dhamma itself, so one has no doubts about the Dhamma. And because one has seen the truth of the Dhamma, one knows that there are other people who, by following the same path, have realized this truth and become members not of the monastic Sangha, but of the Aryan Sangha. This is the spiritual community of the noble ones. So one cuts off this fetter of doubt, and the third fetter one cuts off is clinging to rules and other types of observances with the belief that merely by observing these rules and other observances, one is able to reach liberation. One knows that the way to liberation is the Noble Eightfold Path, not these external rules and observances. Particularly intended here are the kinds of ascetic practices that were undertaken in India during the Buddha's time. Okay, so one cuts off these 3 fetters: view of self, doubt, and wrong grasp of rules and observances. One becomes liberated from the possibility of any kind of lower rebirth. One will take rebirth 7 more times at most, but those rebirths will always be either in the human realm or in the celestial realms, never in the 3 lower realms, the animal realm, the realm of the unhappy spirits, and the hell realms. Okay, as one practices further, then eventually one can reach the stage called Sakadagami, which means the stage of the once-returner. Okay, the once-returner doesn't cut off any new fetters, but he strengthens his spiritual faculties to the point that he weakens greed, hatred, and delusion to such an extent that he can come back to this world more than one more time. He'll have only one more rebirth into this world. So such a one can be reborn again as a human being and reach final liberation in his next human rebirth. He can be reborn in one of the divine realms or heavenly realms, reach final liberation there, or he can be reborn in one of the heavenly realms, then come back one more time to the human realm, and then reach final liberation. So this is the once-returner. As one practices still further, eventually one reaches the 3rd stage of... Okay, and then the once-returner, to continue the simile of the moon, this is like the half moon, where the moon is half bright, half dark, And so we could say in the mind of the once returner, there's half enlightenment, half ignorance is still present. Okay, as he practices further, he'll reach the third stage. This is the stage of anagami, which means the non-returner. The non-returner is one who doesn't come back to this world at all. Doesn't even come back to any of the sensual heavenly realms. But the non-returner takes rebirth in the form realm. This is the realm of the superior Brahmans, the high divinities. Takes rebirth there and reaches final liberation in that realm without ever coming back to this world. Okay, the non-returner, what does a non-returner accomplish? The non-returner cuts off the two other fetters that are called the lower fetters. That is the fetter of sensual desire or sensual craving and ill will, anger, or hatred. And so the non-returner has cut off all five of the lower fetters. They're called the lower fetters because they're the fetters that bind one to existence in the sensual realm. But the non-returner still has a subtle craving for more existence, craving for becoming, very subtle, still has some degree of ignorance. So we can compare the non-returner to the moon when it's the three-quarters moon. Three-quarters brightness, three-quarters of enlightenment, but still one-quarter in darkness, in ignorance. Okay, as one practices still further, then one can reach the fourth and final stage, either in this life or in some future life. That is the stage of arahatship. And the arahat cuts off the five subtle fetters or higher fetters. That is the fetter of craving for existence in the form realm, the fetter of craving for existence in the formless realm, the fetter of subtle conceit, the sense I am, the fetter of restlessness, and finally the last fetter, ignorance. And so the arhat is one who is in this very life attains the undefiled liberation of mind, liberation by wisdom, and is completely freed from the cycle of birth and death. Okay, so those are the four stages, the classical stages of liberation. But now I want to come to the new section. Now we're on page 390, section number 5. Okay, this section introduces another way of dividing up those disciples who have reached these stages of the noble ones. Okay, this is a sevenfold division, which we find in a sutta in the Majjhima Nikaya. It's first introduced there. It's called the Kitagiri Sutta. But then this system of dividing the disciples also becomes absorbed into other suttas. Okay, here the Buddha is speaking, and he says that he's speaking to monks, so he's going to explain in terms of monks. But please remember what I said last week, that the noble persons are not exclusively monastics. that the other stages can be reached by lay people as well as by monastics. So the Buddha says, monks, I do not say of all monks that they still have work to do with diligence, nor do I say of all monks that they have no more work to do with diligence. Okay, then he says that those monks who are arhats, those who have destroyed the taints, the asavas, and so forth, he says, I do not say that these still have work to do with diligence. And why is that? Because they have done their work with diligence and they are no more capable of being negligent. They can't backslide anymore. But I say of those monks who are trainees, remember the trainees are those who are stream enterers, once returners, and non-returners, and those who are on the paths to those levels, whose minds have not yet reached the goal, and who are still aspiring to the unsurpassed security from bondage, that is nibbana, that they still have work to do with diligence. Okay, why is that? Because when those venerable ones make use of suitable lodgings and associate with good friends and nurture their spiritual faculties, they may, by realizing it for themselves with direct knowledge, in this present life enter and dwell on that supreme goal of the spiritual life, for the sake of which clansmen rightly go forth from the home life into homelessness. Seeing this fruit of diligence for these monks, I say that they still have work to do with diligence. So you can see that this passage mentions three factors that are important for making progress along the path. First is to resort to suitable lodgings. The Buddha recommends for those who want to practice meditation very diligently that they resort to remote lodging, to quiet places, free from a lot of commotion, activity, disturbance, where one has a very peaceful, serene, harmonious environment, and that will facilitate one's practice. The second quality is to associate with good friends. This is because the practice of the spiritual path, it's not just a solitary enterprise, but it depends very much on having right association. So one has to find a good teacher, somebody who could guide one in one's practice, and be with other people who are practicing diligently, harmoniously, who share one's aspirations, who can give one encouragement, help when one needs it, and who set a good example. And then perhaps the most important quality is to nurture one's spiritual faculties. These are the 5 faculties of faith, energy, mindfulness, concentration, and wisdom. So these 5 qualities have to be cultivated, and they have to be brought into a suitable balance with one another. It's said that faith and wisdom tend to pull in different directions. Faith tends to credulity. And so faith itself is a necessary quality. One has to have trust in the Buddha, trust in the teaching, trust in the practice. And if one has this trust, then one can undertake the practice diligently, and make progress. But there's a tendency, if faith gets out of hand, it can turn into blind faith, so that one suspends one's critical faculty and becomes ready to believe anything. It can become a kind of dogmatic faith, a faith that's ready to insist only this is true, anything else is wrong, a faith which becomes defensive or aggressive towards those with other beliefs. A faith sometimes which is the undershadow of this faith can be a kind of fear that somebody is questioning one's faith, and then one becomes aggressive towards those who raise doubts and question it. The faith can be excessively credulous, ready to believe anything, to exaggerate one's beliefs about the Buddha, about the Dharma. It can become extremely emotional, so that one gets carried away by emotions of devotion, carried away by one's beliefs. Okay, so faith has to be balanced with the fifth faculty. The fifth faculty is wisdom. Wisdom is what turns the initial trusting faith into a kind of critical faith. A faith which is not ready to believe anything, but a faith which is established on the basis of investigation, of reason, even of a kind of critical doubt, so that one is ready to question one's beliefs and only uphold what stands up under examination. Okay, but wisdom, or what we can call intelligence, if it is not balanced by faith, then it can turn into an excessively critical type of intelligence, which is just ready to question and criticize everything, but not entrust itself to the practice of a spiritual path. And so, in order for this intelligence to develop into true wisdom, then it has to be combined with faith. It's through faith that one trusts the Buddha as the teacher, the Dhamma as the path, and then it's through intelligence that one questions and investigates to the point that one can, through direct insight, confirm one's faith, and thereby this intelligence turns into functional wisdom. So, faith and wisdom, let's say faith and intelligence, have to be balanced to turn faith into a kind of confirmed confidence, confirmed trust, and to turn intelligence into functional wisdom, operative wisdom. Okay, the next, these microphones were not made for monastic robes. Okay, the other two faculties that have to be balanced are energy and concentration. Energy is what activates the mind. Energy is what enables one to apply oneself to the practice. Energy is the factor that's responsible for clearing up and removing unwholesome mental qualities, for developing, arousing wholesome mental qualities. And energy is what pushes one to vigorously cultivate the practice. But if energy branches off and takes its own trajectory, it can turn into restlessness and agitation. Just determined effort without any kind of quieting influence. And so energy has to be counterbalanced by concentration, or we can say by calmness, mental collectedness. So when energy is properly balanced with mental composure, calmness, then the energy instead of turning into excessive strain, excessive vigor, and instead of giving rise to restlessness and agitation, the energy becomes tranquil energy, a calm, majestic energy, which can remain softly in the back of the mind, always pushing oneself forward, but not straining one and causing tension and inner nervous restlessness. Okay, then calmness or concentration has to be activated by energy. If there's just a kind of calmness or tranquility without sufficient energy, it tends to sluggishness, to stagnation, to just a state of inner quietude, but without that force, without that vigor that enables that concentration to function as a base for the arising of wisdom. Okay, so concentration or this inner calmness has to be balanced with effort or energy. And so when effort and inner calmness merge together, then the concentration becomes strong, bright, powerful, able to serve as a base for wisdom. Then the fifth faculty, actually in the sequence, the third faculty is mindfulness. Mindfulness, somebody running on the roof? Outside. It sounds like so. When I was living in Sri Lanka and Kandy, we used to get this running on the roof all the time. These were monkeys. So I'm quite used to having the sound of feet running on my roof. Okay, the third faculty is mindfulness. And mindfulness is placed in the middle and doesn't have any other faculty opposed to it, because mindfulness is the faculty that is responsible for overseeing the other four faculties and for making sure that each one is balanced off against its appropriate counterpart. So mindfulness is somewhat like the supervisor, the manager of the shop, manager of the company. Mindfulness makes sure that the laborers are doing their labor, the clerks are doing their work, the secretary is doing her work, the sales agents are doing their work. So mindfulness makes sure that faith is not getting too strong in relationship to intelligence. And when it happens that way, mindfulness ensures that intelligence is strengthened to balance off faith. If energy is threatening to outstrip concentration, mindfulness will work to see that concentration is strengthened so that it can balance off energy and so forth. So mindfulness, the Buddha says, is useful in all these relationships between the faculties. Mindfulness is what harmonizes the other four faculties and keeps them in balance. Okay, so we have as these three requisites for making progress: suitable lodgings, the company of spiritual friends, good friends, and nurturing the spiritual faculties. Okay, now the Buddha introduces the scheme of the 7 kinds of noble persons. First, he'll just mention their names, then he'll explain what they mean. The 7 of one called liberated in both ways, then liberated by wisdom. The 3rd is the body witness. 4th is one attained to view. Perhaps this should be attained through view. 1 liberated by faith, a Dhamma follower and a faith follower. I'll write the Pali names for these on the board. Okay, so this is the list of the 7, and now you can go through the text and see how they are explained. Okay, we're in paragraph 15. We have the person who is called the one liberated in both ways. This is Ubbatobbhaga Vimutta. Okay, here's the explanation. First I'll read it, then I'll give explanation. Here, some person contacts with the body and dwells in those liberations that are peaceful and formless, transcending forms, and his taints are destroyed by his seeing with wisdom. This kind of person is called one liberated in both ways. Then the Buddha says, I do not say of such a monk that he still has work to do with diligence. Why is that? He has done his work with diligence. He is no more capable of being negligent. In other words, this means that this person is an arahant. Okay, now it's said that this person contacts with the body and dwells in those liberations that are peaceful and formless, transcending forms. Now, in the stages of concentration or samadhi, there are usually mentioned 8 stages of samadhi. There are the 4 jhanas and the 4 formless meditations. And beyond these, there's the stage called Sanya-Vedayika Nirodha, the cessation of perception and feeling. It's a stage or a meditative attainment in which perception and feeling come to a stop completely. Okay, these are sometimes organized into 8, maybe I don't have to use the 8 liberations. Okay, we'll just use the scheme of the 4 jhanas, that's meditative absorptions. Beyond that, the 4 formless attainments, the base of infinite space, base of infinite consciousness, base of nothingness, base of neither perception nor non-perception. And then the 9th attainment is the cessation of perception and feeling. Now, the person who is called liberated in both ways is able to attain these formless liberations. He's able to achieve sometimes all 4 formless meditations and the cessation of perception and feeling. But at a minimum, it's said, to qualify as liberated in both ways, one has to be able to achieve at least the base of infinite space. That is the lowest of the 4 formless meditations. And when it's said that that person contacts with the body, kayena pusitva. I don't think that should be understood literally, that one experiences it with the physical body. The way I understand it, it's a way of indicating that this person has a very full and deep and intensive experience of the formless meditations. It's not that just occasionally, with a great deal of effort, he might be able to enter them very briefly and come out. But the way I understand it, he has to be able to to reach those attainments whenever he wants to, and to dwell in them for a long time, and to experience them very deeply, so that he could actually dwell in them for a sustained period of time. Okay, so that is the first requirement. And this requirement is not in any way exclusive to arahants, or even to the Buddha's disciples. Many of these attainments, the formless attainments, were known in India even before the Buddha arose. So when the Buddha went seeking the path to enlightenment, he first studied with meditation masters who were able to teach the formless meditations. The Buddha attained them, and he was dissatisfied with them because he found on their own they don't constitute enlightenment. And so the Buddha therefore set out and found a different way which can use the formless attainments, but it gives the precedence to the functioning of wisdom. Okay, but after the Buddha reached enlightenment, when he devised the different stages of his path, he included the formless meditations within the path, not as necessary stages, but for those who have a particular aptitude for deep samadhi. The Buddha encouraged them, and many of his disciples achieved these formless meditations. Okay, so to become liberated in both ways, the first requirement is that one is able to contact with the body and dwell in the formless meditations. And this is the first type of liberation. It's liberated in both ways. So the first, what's meant by the first way here, is that one is liberated from the bond, the limits of material form. Because one is able to enter the formless meditations, one can completely transcend the sphere of matter, substantial matter. One could go into these meditations in which the mind becomes completely immersed in states which have nothing to do with materiality. Okay, the second aspect of this liberation is indicated by the phrase, his taints are destroyed by his seeing with wisdom. The taints here, these are the three asavas. I don't actually like the word taints, but I use it. The three asavas, the three influxes of sensual craving, craving for renewed existence, and ignorance. And so, eradication of the three asavas, this is the distinctive mark of the arhat. And by eradicating the asavas, one becomes liberated from samsara, from the round of rebirths. And so that is the second liberation. So the one who's liberated in both ways is an arahant who, because he's an arahant, he's liberated from the round of rebirths, and because he possesses the formless meditations, he's liberated from the limitations of material form. Okay, then we come to the second person. This is the one liberated by wisdom, Panya-vimukta. So what kind of person is liberated by wisdom? Here, some person does not contact with the body and dwell in those liberations that are peaceful and formless, transcending forms, but his taints are destroyed by his seeing with wisdom. This kind of person is called one liberated by wisdom. And the Buddha says of this person too, I say that he has no more work to do with diligence. So this is another kind of arhat. He is destroy the taints through wisdom, and so he's liberated from samsara, from the round of rebirths. But this person doesn't attain the formless liberations. His samadhi is not so powerful, not so well developed, that he's able to completely transcend the form realm and enter the meditations of the formless realm. And so these meditations, these formless meditations, some of the Buddha's contemporaries thought that this was the state of liberation. So if one can reach the stage of nothingness, the stage of neither perception nor non-perception, then they said one is completely liberated. But the Buddha said this is not the case. If one reaches the formless meditations, it just means that one has reached a state of deep quietude, a state of deep concentration. But the defilements, including ignorance, are still present deep within the mind. And to eradicate the defilements, one has to develop wisdom. And so the stage, the special practice that the Buddha introduced was the practice of insight, which brings the maturation of wisdom. And it's wisdom that brings liberation. But for those who develop deep samadhi, the Buddha praises them and encourages them, and he gives them the special designation, liberated in both ways. Those who lack that samadhi, but develop their wisdom to the point where they can cut off the defilements, are liberated by wisdom. One who is liberated by wisdom generally will still have some attainment in the jhanas. The 4 jhanas are defined by the Buddha as sammasamadhi, right concentration. So in the oldest texts, we can see that when the Buddha is describing any arhat, he usually describes him as one who possesses the 4 jhanas. Over time, however, there developed in the commentaries the idea that there is a kind of arhat liberated by wisdom who doesn't attain the jhanas. This comes to be called the Sukha Vipassaka, which means the dry insight arhat. One who develops insight, but this insight is called dry because samadhi moistens the mind. It makes the mind soft, tranquil, smooth. And so when one develops wisdom without this very deep samadhi, the insight is somewhat forceful, sharp, and dry. Okay, so over time there emerges in texts like the Visuddhimagga, other commentaries, mention of the dry insight arhat. But in the oldest texts and the suttas, we generally see the arhat, even the one liberated by wisdom, to be in possession of the 4 jhanas, or at least one of them. Okay, so these 2 stages are the stage of the arhat. Okay, so now we come to the next 3 who fit into a group. You'll see that there is certain commonality to their description. The top of the list is called the body witness. In Pali it's kaya saki. Okay, here is the definition. Here, some person contacts with the body and dwells in those liberations that are peaceful and formless transcending forms, and some of his taints are destroyed by his seeing with wisdom. This kind of person is called a body witness. And the Buddha says, I say of such a monk that he still has work to do with diligence. Why is that? And then basically the same statement as before. So this person still has work to do with diligence. He still has to cultivate the path further. So this is a person still in training. But what qualifies this person as a body witness is that he has contacted with the body. In other words, he attains very deeply, very intensively, very intimately the formless meditations, the liberations, peaceful and formless, transcending forms. So he's able to reach the formless meditations, but it says only some of his taints are destroyed by seeing with wisdom. Not all of them. He's not completely liberated from the defilements. He actually has not yet eradicated any of the taints, but he's reduced to some extent the defilements, the taints. Okay, and this person can be a non-returner, a once-returner, or a stream enterer. The stream enterer, the once-returner, still have all three of the asavas, all three of the taints. Sensual craving, craving for renewed becoming, and ignorance. But they've eliminated these taints partly, not in full. The once-returner, has also eliminated them partly, not in full. The non-returner has completely eliminated sensual craving, but still has the craving for renewed existence and still has ignorance. Okay, so then we'll come to the next person. This is called one attained to view. The Pali name is Ditthipatto. Ditthipatto, actually it should be Ditthipatto, it's better. And because of the way Pali compounds are formed, it's hard to say whether, Ditthi means view, Patta means attain. So this would be literally view attainer. And from the definition, it seems to me that it's more appropriate to say that this person is one who is attained through view, by means of view. In other words, by means of wisdom. Okay, here is the definition. Here, some person does not contact with the body and dwell in those liberations that are peaceful and formless, transcending forms, but some of his taints are destroyed by seeing with wisdom. Okay, this part of the definition, we can say, matches the definition of the body witness, except that there's one important difference. The person attained to view is not able to attain the formless meditations. Or if he attains them, he doesn't have any kind of mastery over them. He's not able to dwell in them, touching them with the body. But he has eliminated some of his taints by seeing with wisdom, which means that this person is at least a stream enterer. So he's somewhere between the stage of stream enterer at the minimum non-returner at the maximum. Then the next phrase explains the distinctive attribute of the person attained to view. He has reviewed and examined with wisdom the teachings proclaimed by the Tathagata, by the Buddha. This phrase emphasizes that the special faculty of one attained to view is wisdom. This person attains by giving special attention to wisdom, by reviewing, examining, investigating the Buddha's teachings, and then penetrating into the truth of the teaching through wisdom. So this person, we could say, is the trainee, the person in the stage of training who is tending to reach, as an arhat, the stage of liberation by wisdom. The person who is the body witness, number 3, that person, when he reaches arhatship, when he eradicates all of the defilements, he'll reach arhatship as one liberated in both ways. And so there's a relationship, we could say, between 3 and 1 and 4 and 2. Okay, now we come to the 5th person. Interestingly, this is called, in Pali, it's known as Saddhavimutta, which means, literally it means liberated by faith. But as we read the definition of this, we see the person isn't liberated. And so a suspicion came to me early, years ago, that the name of this type of person actually got mistaken in the course of transmission, and that the person should really be called not Saddha Vimutta, one liberated by faith, but Saddha Dimutta, which comes from, it's a blend of, you see, Saddha Vimutta is a compound of the word Saddha, which means faith, and Vimutta, which means liberated. But if the person isn't liberated, why do we say liberated by faith? So the suspicion came to me from some of the descriptions of this type of person that they should actually be called Saddhadimutta, which means one who is resolved by means of faith, one who is intent on the Dhamma on account of faith. This is a compound of the word Saddha, faith, and Adimutta, which means determined, resolved, fixed in one's mind. Then interestingly, I found in some Sanskrit Buddhist works that this person is actually called Shraddhadimutta. That's the Sanskrit for Saddhadimutta. I think in the Abhidharma Kosha, this is the great Abhidharma treatise of the Sanskrit school, we have Shraddhadimutta. Okay, but let's look at the definition of this person. This is paragraph 19. Here, some person does not contact with the body and dwell in those liberations that are peaceful and formless, transcending forms, but some of his taints are destroyed by his seeing with wisdom. Okay, this much, it's exactly the same as the definition of the one attained to view. But then we come to the differentiating part of the sentence. And his faith is planted, rooted, and established in the Tathagata. This kind of person is called one liberated by faith. See, I have a note there that I just didn't notice. Note not so helpful for me. Okay. So what's distinctive of this person is that he has faith which is planted, rooted, and established in the Tathagata. And this indicates what distinguishes between the person attained to view and the one liberated by faith. Both need faith and wisdom. Without faith and wisdom, no ability to achieve realization. But the person attained to view is one who gives emphasis, who puts emphasis on investigation, inquiry, and who undertakes the practice and makes the breakthrough through the power of wisdom. The person liberated by faith or resolved through faith also makes the breakthrough by means of wisdom. Wisdom is the knife that cuts through the darkness of ignorance and brings realization. But the strong point of this person, their motivating force, their dominant faculty, is their faith and devotion to the Buddha. And we actually can see this, not talking about noble disciples, but even in most practitioners in Buddhist countries. We could say that there's a small number of people who really like to study the Dhamma, to investigate, to raise questions, to reflect on the Dhamma. And so those are the people who are inclining in the direction of attained to view. But most people in traditional Buddhist countries have strong faith and devotion towards the Buddha. They participate in pujas, ceremonies, worship, devotional practices. And we could say that these people are moving in the direction of liberated by faith. But to make that breakthrough, they have to develop panya, or wisdom. Okay, now these three people, these three classes, as I said, can include anyone at the lower three stages of realization. Stream enterer, once returner, non-returner. But now we come to the sixth and seventh person. If you remember, last week I said that each stage of attainment has two phases. One is the stage of attainment itself. The other is the path leading to that stage. Now these two people, the Dhammanusari and the Sadhanusari, these are two people who have reached the stage, who have reached the path leading definitely to stream entry. These people at this stage cannot pass away without attaining stream entry. They are bound to reach stream entry. Okay, let us see how they're defined. Okay, first we come to the person who's called Dhammanusari, which means a Dhamma follower, or one who is flowing along with the Dhamma, or flowing along through the Dhamma. The word Anusari has the meaning of flowing along. Okay, here some person does not contact with the body and dwell in those liberations that are peaceful and formless, transcending forms, and his taints are not yet destroyed by his seeing with wisdom. Okay, that's the very important phrase. His taints are not yet destroyed by seeing with wisdom. This person has not yet eliminated any of the taints in any degree yet. But those teachings proclaimed by the Tathagata are accepted after being pondered to a sufficient degree with wisdom. This phrase indicates the special mode of practice of this person. The person ponders with wisdom the teachings proclaimed by the Tathagata. He learns the teachings, he ponders them, reflects on them, examines them. Okay, this might give the impression that this person is developing just an intellectual path of study and reflection. But the next sentence should reveal that that is a mistake. Furthermore, he has these qualities, these particular factors. The faith faculty, the energy faculty, the mindfulness faculty, the concentration faculty, and the wisdom faculty. So the person, you can't say that this is just a person who takes an intellectual approach without meditation. No. This person has right mindfulness, has right samadhi. So the person is a meditator who's developed insight, but after reaching a certain point in the practice of meditation, the person gives emphasis to investigating the Dhamma, either through reflection or through the practice of insight meditation. Okay, so this person is emphasizing the practice of insight, and through the maturation of insight, this person has reached a stage where they've left the realm of ordinary persons and entered onto the definite path, the irreversible path to liberation. But they haven't yet made the breakthrough to the first stage of attainment, the first stage of realization. And so they have to strengthen the five faculties. They have to strengthen their faith, energy, mindfulness, concentration, and wisdom. Bring these five faculties into harmony. When the five faculties are strengthened and harmonized, then they will pass from the stage of a Dhamma follower. What stage will they come out on? Speak out loud. Right. Ditthipata. This is a person who is moving on in such a way that they will come out as Ditthipata. And when they reach arhatship, how will they come out? As probably Panya-vimutta. I should have mentioned also the Saddha-vimutta. It's not so clear where this person will come out. I think the Saddha-vimutta can go in either direction. Come here, or can go here. Okay, now we come to the seventh type of person. What kind of person is a faith follower? This is the Saddhanusari. Again, Anusari means flowing along. So this is a person who's flowing along through faith, flowing along by means of faith. Here some person does not contact with the body and dwell in those liberations that are peaceful and formless, transcending forms, and his taints are not yet destroyed by his seeing with wisdom. Okay, so this much indicates that this person is not yet a noble, is not yet even a stream enterer. He hasn't eliminated the taints in any degree yet by wisdom. He hasn't reached any stage of definite attainment. Okay, and this much of this part of the description is the same as that of the one who's attained to as the Dhamma follower. But here comes the distinguishing characteristic. Yet he has sufficient faith in the Tathagata, sufficient love or devotion to the Tathagata. Saddha matta pema matta, Tathagate saddha matta pema matta. So this indicates that the distinguishing quality of this type of person is faith and devotion towards the Buddha. And so through this faith and devotion, this person is motivated to undertake the practice. And by undertaking the practice, he develops the spiritual qualities and then becomes able to reach the stage of definite, the irreversible path. Again, the attainment of the path has to come about through wisdom. It's not faith that brings one onto the path. But for this person, the way I understand it, the motivation for practice, the driving inner force in that person is their love and devotion to the Buddha. And so this person has the 5 spiritual faculties. They have faith, energy, mindfulness, concentration, and wisdom. But of these 5 faculties, for this person, what is the strongest faculty? What is it? It's faith. And that faith inspires them so that they take up the practice of meditation, so that they investigate the teachings. And so motivated by faith, developing, purifying the mind in meditation, investigating with wisdom, eventually they reach the stage of irreversibility, and then pushed on by their faith, they'll reach the first stage of stream entry. And so we could say that the Sadhanusari, when they reach the stage of stream entry, what do they become? They become Saddhavimutta, one liberated by faith. Okay, this completes the 7-fold types of individuals. But before I open to questions, I want to jump ahead to one passage in the next section which will clarify the status and means of practice of these lowest 2 individuals. Here, this is the passage on page 393, section number 2, called Entering the Fixed Course of Rightness. Now, this is a very important expression. In Pali, this expression, it's sammata niyama. Sammata comes from the word samma, which means right, as in when we speak about the Noble Eightfold Path, samma ditthi, samma sankappa. And then it has samma, gets this TTA at the end. Why does it have TTA? What?
Abstract noun.
Right, it becomes an abstract noun. Okay, so that's why we call it rightness. So it actually means the truly noble Eightfold Path. And then niyama means something like fixed determination, the fixed way. In Chinese, is this zhang zhui hui? Is that what? Zhang zhui hui? Stage, way is stage. Yeah. Way, not, I'm sorry, did I say way? I'm getting into that habit then. Yeah, zhang is rightness, zhui is fixed. Yeah, like zhui ding, zhang zhui, wei. Okay, so we'll look at the passage. The I is impermanent, changing, undergoing alteration. So the ear, nose, tongue, body, mind, impermanent, changing, undergoing alteration. One who places faith in these teachings and resolves on them thus is called a faith follower, one who has entered the fixed course of rightness, entered the plane of superior persons, transcended the plane of the worldlings. Okay, so here we have the teaching on the impermanence of the six sense faculties. Okay, so it says, one who places faith in these teachings and resolves on them thus is called a faith follower. Okay, to become a faith follower, it doesn't mean simply that one believes in these teachings. But the way I understand it, one has to see these principles with insight, but one is motivated to practice, one is resolved on the practice because of one's faith in the Buddha, one's devotion to the Buddha, one's trust in the Buddha. And so that is the driving force. One places faith in these teachings, undertakes the practice of insight, and then at a certain point, one enters the fixed course of rightness. That is when the insight comes into harmony with the actual nature of things. A shift takes place in the mind so that one leaves behind one's status as a putujana, an ordinary person, and one enters the plane of the sappurisa, the superior persons, the plane of the noble ones. So one is now a noble disciple who is fixed along this course of rightness, practicing the truly noble Eightfold Path. Then it said, such a person is incapable of doing any deed by reason of which he might be reborn in hell, reborn in the animal realm, reborn in the domain of afflicted spirits. So this person, it said, cannot do any deed that will lead them to a rebirth in the three lower realms. Interestingly, it doesn't yet say that they are freed from the prospect of rebirth in the lower realms. But definitely they won't be reborn there. Then comes the very important phrase. This person is incapable of passing away without having realized the fruit of stream entry. This means that within that very same lifetime, the person who has become the faith follower has to realize the stage of stream entry. Even if the person is on the verge of death, even within that lead up to the death process, they'll reach the stage of stream entry. But according to the statement, they can pass away without having reached it. Okay, this is the explanation of the faith follower, the seventh person in this scheme. Now we come to the Dhamma follower. One for whom these teachings, this actually begins with the same opening statement. The I is impermanent, changing, undergoing alteration, and so on. Then it says, one for whom these teachings are accepted thus after being pondered to a sufficient degree with wisdom is called a Dhamma follower, one who has entered the fixed course of rightness, entered the plane of superior persons, transcended the plane of the worldlings. And then such a one too can't do any deeds by which they can be reborn in the three lower realms, and they're incapable of passing away without having realized the fruit of stream entry. So the distinguishing characteristic of this person, unlike the faith follower, he's not one who resolves on the teaching through faith, but rather he's one who ponders the teaching with wisdom. Again, he has the 5 spiritual faculties, but he gives precedence to the faculty of wisdom. And so his motivation for practice is investigating the Dharma, examining things. This is the kind of person who likes to understand, whose passion is to figure things out, to know the truth, to see the truth. And so as this person is pondering, reflecting, examining the impermanence of the sense faculties, they make this shift or transition from the stage of ordinary person to the stage of the noble person. But this one, because they give emphasis to wisdom, they are called a Dhamma follower. Okay, so these are the 2 persons on the path to stream entry. Then the last paragraph says, one who knows and sees these teachings thus is called a stream enterer, no longer bound to the lower world, fixed in destiny with enlightenment as his destination. So the distinguishing mark of the stream enterer is that he's passed to the point where he knows and sees actually more than just the impermanence of the sense faculties, but what he knows and sees are the Dhammas that make up the 4 noble truths. So this one can see all 4 noble truths. And by knowing and seeing the 4 noble truths, one becomes the stream enterer, who is completely released from the possibility of rebirth in the lower realms, fixed in destiny, that means bound to reach full liberation, and he has full enlightenment as his destination. Okay, maybe I'll pause here and then ask whether there's any questions. I think please take the handout microphone.
Thank you. I hear a difference in the 2 faith followers. The second, this paragraph we just worked on, talks about faith in the impermanence teachings, which is, I think, more specific than the earlier faith in the Tathagata.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Yeah.
So, is it both, or are you a faith follower if you haven't yet gotten the impermanent teachings, or?
Maybe this sheds some light on what is meant by having faith in the Tathagata. It's probably not just a personal faith, the faith in the Buddha as a person, but it's a faith in the Buddha as a teacher. And so one is willing to accept what the Buddha teaches on faith, and then that becomes the basis for one's practice. But it's an interesting point. The different phrases seem to highlight different aspects of that faith.
But there are many more teachings than the impermanence teaching.
Yeah. This is actually the beginning of a chapter. See, it's chapter 25, sutta number 1. Then there are 10 suttas in that chapter, and each one gives a different teaching. So I just took, in order to give an example, I just took the first teaching. But I think they're all phrased in terms of impermanence. But of course there are many different teachings of the Buddha, but for some reason this chapter is just taking impermanence, changing, becoming otherwise. But it develops that in regard to, here it's the 6 sense faculties, and it's the 6 sense objects, 6 types of consciousness, 6 types of contact, 6 types of feeling. Then I think that goes into the 5 aggregates, 4 elements, 6 elements maybe. I don't remember all the chapters.
But excuse me, but aren't we going into wisdom from faith with that? With those teachings?
Yeah, but my point is that even to reach the stage of the faith follower, what brings that transition is still wisdom. It's always wisdom. But the difference, the way I understand it, between the faith follower and the wisdom follower is what is their driving motivation? What is that sort of, or let us say their dominant passion? In the case of the faith follower, his motivation, his sort of dominant passion is his faith and trust in the Buddha as a fully enlightened teacher and the teachings of the Buddha as the way to liberation. But once he has that faith, in order to progress and reach the stage of faith follower, he has to develop these 5 faculties, and particularly the faculty of wisdom, through which he can gain some insight into these principles. For the wisdom follower, or the Dhamma follower, the driving motivation, the dominant passion, is that urge to understand, to disentangle the mystery of the nature of the world and see what is the real nature of things. And so motivated by that, he'll investigate and make that breakthrough.
Besides the Buddha, is the arhat able to realize the experience of these 6 realms? Only Buddhists can overcome and capable to realize that.
To realize
the 6 realms.
The realms of existence.
Yeah, exactly.
No, not all arahats, but there are some arahats who develop what is called the divine eye. This is the kind of spiritual vision through which they can see beyond things that are visible to the sensory eye. And so they can also see other realms of existence. But not all arhats have that ability, but those who develop the divine eye can see into other realms.
So, you practice comes to fruition.
Wait, take the microphone.
So, if you have faith and practice comes to fruition, you can anybody can have direct experience to these 6 realms of existence. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, those who direct their mind to develop those that special ability will be able to do so.
Okay.
But it takes a lot of training, they say.
Okay, I'm not still certain, or I don't still understand about the contact with the body part thing.
Contact with the body.
Right. Seems to me the number 1 has a contact with the body, and then everything with the wisdom has no contact with the body.
But don't forget, in this formula, that expression, contact with the body, is used only in relation to the formless meditations.
Right.
Maybe to show that the experience of these formless meditations is an especially intense experience. And so the functioning of wisdom is described here in a different way. It doesn't use that expression, contact with the body. But there is a sutta, in fact I think it might be in this book. Let me just see if I can remember where it is. I think it goes back to the 3rd chapter. Yes, on page 100, in paragraph 20. Here the Buddha is describing a disciple who has undertaken the different stages of practice. And towards the end of this paragraph, he says, okay, having scrutinized, he strives, resolutely striving, he realizes with the body the supreme truth and sees it by penetrating it with wisdom. It's not the phrase, it doesn't use the word contact. That is pusitva, kayena pusitva. But here it uses realizes, kayena satchikatva, paramang satchang. And then penetrating it with wisdom, panyaya. I don't remember. Okay, so with wisdom, usually the verb that is used is seeing. Wisdom is considered something like a visual faculty. So one sees with wisdom. But the experience of the deeper meditative states is almost like a tactile experience. And so it's described as contacting with the body. It's just metaphorical usage. Don't take these metaphorical expressions too literally.
Does it have anything to do with, in the 5th jhana, you do not have a mental feeling of happiness, but body still feeling happy by body or something like that?
That comes in the description of the 3rd jhana.
Is it third?
Yeah.
Has nothing to do with the body feeling?
No.
Okay, I need to have one more clarify. Did you say that the faith follower and the Dharma follower are free from being reborn in the lower 3 lower realms, but they are not free from the prospect of being reborn in the lower realm? Did you just say that?
All I know is what the text says, and what the text says is that they do not do any evil deed by reason of which they might be reborn in the hell realm. What is it? He is incapable of doing any deed by reason of which he might be reborn in hell, in the animal realm, or in the realm of afflicted spirits. Okay, so that's what it says. It doesn't say that he's freed from the 3 lower realms. That statement comes only with the attainment of stream entry. Then it says he's no longer, at the bottom of that page, he's no longer bound to the lower world. Wait, I'm not yet quite finished. But the implication seems to be now once one becomes either a faith follower or Dharma follower, once one enters the path, one has to reach stream entry in that very life. When one reaches stream entry, then it's said definitely that one is no longer subject to rebirth in the hells, the animal realm, or the realm of the afflicted spirits. And so we could say definitely that somebody who becomes a Dhamma follower or a faith follower will never again be reborn in the lower realms. But for some reason, I don't know the reason, and I haven't seen a clear explanation of it. For some reason, the person at these two stages on the path to stream entry is not described as one who is freed from the three lower realms, one who is no longer subject to the three lower realms. But it would become a definite inference that that person has to be freed from the lower realms, can never be reborn there, because he has to achieve stream entry within that life.
I mean that although he is already far enough along that he is destined to have stream entry before death or by death, he nevertheless feels subject to fall into that realm because he feels the pressure from it. He still feels bound, and so his own sensation is that he is subject. That he believes he is capable of being reborn in a lower realm, despite the fact that he actually is not, because he still has enough contact with the lower realm to feel its pressure.
It's an interesting point. I haven't seen any statement to that effect.
Well, that would be saying that the idea of saying that he cannot be reborn in the lower realm because he will reach stream entry.
Yeah.
Okay. So the objective fact would be that, but his subjectivity says he feels vulnerable.
That might be the case. There might be a way to explain that point. But I haven't seen this explained that way in the text, but it might be the case.
So this teaching is like for the two different temperaments of people.
Right.
Basically, even from the
Yeah, put it closer to me.
From the Indian philosophy, you have like the Bhakti yogi that was faithful, and then you had the meditator that was more, so the divisions at that time were kind of common.
Yeah, actually the different yogas of the Indian tradition probably really evolved at a later time. But we could see a correspondence here. Okay, let us say that there's a certain correspondence. In India there's called, or what they call the three, sometimes 4 yogas or 3 margas. The 4 yogas are Jnana Yoga, which is the yoga of knowledge, the Raja Yoga, which is the more meditative yoga, Bhakti Yoga, the yoga of devotion, and then Karma Yoga, the yoga of action. You might say that there's a correspondence between Jnana Yoga and the path which is taken by the Panya-vimutta Arhat, the Ditthipata, and the Dhammanusari. The Raja Yoga, this is the yoga of meditation, emphasizing strong samadhi, seems to correspond to the way taken by the both ways liberated, Ubato Bhaga Vimutta Arhat, the Kaya Sati trainee, and we don't have a counterpart to the lower. I'm going to come to that in a moment. Bhakti Yoga seems to have some correspondence with the path of the Sadhanusari, Saddhavimutta, but we don't have one who's liberated through bhakti. Then Karma Yoga, we don't have a counterpart. Maybe that becomes the Bodhisattva path. That's the path of action in the world with a mind free from attachment, free from concern with results. What? Well, the 4 yogas of Hinduism, maybe the seeds were already developing in the early period. but they don't become constituted as distinct paths probably till, I don't know what century, but probably after the Christian era they become. The Bhagavad Gita is second century BC and already recognizes these, at least, some of these paths. So maybe they start really to crystallize by about the 2nd century BC.
I really appreciate this, knowing the quality of the person, understanding the person gives you so much insight into, the way people practice.
Right,
And then the factor of wisdom is the turning point of wisdom where it turns into.
Yeah, I wanted to bring up one point that I just touched on briefly just right now. But before I take another question, I want to come to this one point. One thing that one might notice when we come to these first 2 stages, those who are entering the path, we don't have here, and this is a puzzle to me, a counterpart, or let's say the preliminary phase, of one who's going to be Kaya Saki and Ubato Bhaga Vimutta. We don't have one who gives special emphasis to strong concentration. And this is something of a puzzle because in the Buddha's time, there would have been yogis coming into Buddhism from other communities, spiritual communities, where they would have been practicing these deep, formless meditations. Even the Buddha himself learned these meditations before his enlightenment. And so there were groups of ascetics practicing these meditations in the forests and hermitages. But it's a little bit puzzling. Why don't we find somebody like a Samadhanusari or Samat or Jhananusari, one who flows along through Samadhi or through Jhana? The only thing I could think of, and it's just pure speculation, is that the practice of Samadhi or Jhana is not something distinctive to the Buddha's dispensation, whereas having strong faith specifically in the Buddha and his teaching, and having the wisdom that investigates the Buddha's teaching, those would be something special to the Buddha's dispensation. So my supposition is that one who comes in to these stages with a background experience of strong samadhi will, at this first part of the path, enter either through sadhanusari or dhammanusari. But then when they bring their strong samadhi experience into their practice, then they will go on to kaya saki and then to ubato bhaga vimutta. But again, that's my supposition.
2 more questions. The arhatships, can a layman attain arhatships, but they have to be ascetics? And my second question is about jhanas.
Let's take each question, one question at a time. My memory is getting a little feeble. So people ask 2 questions. By the time I finish explaining the first one, I've forgotten the second. Okay, the first one, can a layperson achieve arhatship? Now what is said in the text, the way we have the text laid out, I dealt with this last week. In the standard descriptions, lay people are described as attaining stream entry, once returning, non-returning. When they reach the stage of non-returner, then they necessarily become celibate. So they're leading almost monastic lives, even though for some reason they might still have to remain within the household and not be able to go forth as a monastic. Now as to the final stage, the stage of arhatship, we say in the text that there are some cases of people who, as laymen, they meet the Buddha, hear his teaching, and they reach arhatship. But when they reach arhatship, they're not able to remain any longer in the household life because they lose even the minimum amount of worldly concern that one needs to maintain a household. So once they reach arhatship, they spontaneously seek to go forth and become monastics.
Thank you. Second question about the jhanas. What's the experience of the treating of the infant's face and infant's consciousness?
Yeah. I can't deal with all questions from people who come to a later class, because this is a topic that I dealt with in an earlier class. So I don't remember the date, but all of my recent lectures, including the one on these formless attainments, will be found on Ustream. If you look up Ustream, I think, is it Ben Bodhi or Venerable? Okay, she will write the Ustream address. Okay, I want to take some of these questions that are coming through the computer. Okay, is the idea of the dry insight... I always forget to tell them not to ring that bell. Okay, I'll use this time to ponder these questions. Okay, is the idea of dry insight arhat found in the early suttas? Okay, I said that it's not in the early text, it comes in the commentaries. How does it fit into the 7 categories? The dry insight arhat is included under Panya Vimutta, one of the liberated by wisdom. Okay, second question, how is doubt in the 5 hindrances related to mindfulness in the 5 faculties? I don't know if there's I don't know of any direct relationship, except that through mindfulness one is able to overcome doubt amongst the 5 hindrances. Is the purpose of developing the 5 faculties to reduce the 5 hindrances? There seems to be some correspondence. Usually the 5 faculties are not brought in relation to reducing the 5 hindrances, because the 5 faculties are mainly concerned with developing wisdom. They're part of the path of insight. So one could say of the 5 faculties, of course, faith, energy, mindfulness are important faculties. And then these work together to overcome the 5 hindrances. And when the 5 hindrances are overcome, then one gains samadhi or concentration. But but there's still a 5th faculty of wisdom, which is not directly related to overcoming the 5 hindrances, except one needs a certain degree of wisdom to understand how the hindrances arise, what kind of practices can be undertaken to counteract them, and so on. But usually the 5 faculties are presented in relation to achieving the stages, the break of the realization through wisdom. Because the emphasis there is on the prerequisites for developing the faculty of wisdom, which is then the faculty that brings realization. In what ways do liberation of the mind and liberation by wisdom differ? in the focus of one's practice and one's attainments? How do they fit into the 7 categories? The question too broad. I mean, it's almost needs a doctoral dissertation to ask. Okay, does Saddha and Saddha Vimutta refer to breaking the 3 lower fetters, including doubt? Thereby one attains the 4 unshakable faiths in the 3 gems. I think best we just simply understand Saddha the way it's explained in the text. That's all I can say. We have in the text of Majjhima Nikaya number 70, he has sufficient faith in the Tathagata. In the sutta on the fixed course of rightness, he places faith in these teachings on the impermanence of the 6 sense faculties. But doubt in the 3 lower fetters is not overcome by faith, but it's overcome by wisdom. Through seeing the truth, one removes faith. By seeing the truth, one removes doubt about the teachings. What is the meaning of Samatha Niyama? I thought that I explained it. I said it's the fixed course of rightness. That means that one enters upon the truly Noble Eightfold Path, which is going to take one irreversibly to the attainment of stream entry. Okay, we'll have to stop now and share with the sharing of the merits, and then we'll come back after lunch for discussion. If anybody has any questions, they're welcome to come back at 12 o'clock. Okay, so we share the merits with the deities, the Nagas, and other beings, wishing them to rejoice and to be well and happy. Akasata chabumata deva naga mahidika punyanta anumoditva Shirang rakantu sasana Akasata chabumata Deva naga mahidika punyantang anumoditva Shirang rakantu desana Akasata chabumata Deva naga mahidika punyantang anumoditva Shirang rakantu manaparam Etavata mehi sampadam punya sampadam. Do it the short way. Sabbe devanumodantu, sabbe bhutanumodantu, sabbe sattanumodantu, sabba sampati siddhya, bhavagupadaya, avici hetato. Etantare satakayupapanna rupi arupicha asanya sanino dukha pamuchantu pusantu nibuting.